Getting the backstory on a vacant house. Have you ever driven past a vacant house and thought to yourself, what's going on with that property? Who owns it? What got them into the position they're in now, and what are they going to do with the property? Well, in this video, I'm going to share with you what professional real estate investors do in order to figure out what's going on with a vacant house. And in fact, you can apply what I share here on any property, not just a vacant property. Hi, I'm Phil Pustiowski with FreedomMentor.com. I'm a full-time real estate investor, real estate mentor and coach to many of the most successful real estate investors all across North America. Thanks to you, this is by far and away the #1 YouTube channel for real estate investors with millions and millions of views. I also have a couple of best-selling books. The first is How to Be a Real Estate Investor, and the second one, relatively new, Real Estate Investing Gone Bad. These two books are required reading for anyone who's interested in learning about real estate investing. So you're driving down your normal street that you typically take your kids to school, and voila, you notice that a property you've driven past so many times appears to be abandoned, appears to be vacant, and you're curious. Well, how do you quench that curiosity? Here's what you do. You start with the free public records that are available to everyone. And that will give us not only an indication of who the owner may be, or probably is, but also what's going on with the property. And then you can start to draw some conclusions from the information you gather. One of the exciting things is there's a tremendous amount of information available for free in most cases to everyone. So let's talk about public records. I want to break these up for this video into 4 departments. Department number 1, I'm going to call tax collector. Now here's the problem. Every government, and these are local governments at a county level, or if you're in Louisiana, that would be a parish level, or if you're in Alaska, it would be a borough level. So the tax collector may not be called the tax collector. For example, in Tennessee, they're called the trustee. But we have this department we're going to call the tax collector, and what they do is they collect property taxes. So they're the ones that deal with the property taxes being paid and the ones that are being past due, and if they're past due, they become tax liens. After a certain number of years as a tax lien, it can almost become either a tax deed sale in Florida, or they just literally get quiet title in other states. So tax collector collects the property taxes. Number 2, we have this department called the Property Appraiser. That's someone who is determining the value. Now these two are very closely related, because in order to determine what the tax bill is going to be, they're going to base it on the property value. And so there's an organization or a department that puts a value on every single piece of real estate in their jurisdiction. And we're talking vacant land, commercial buildings, houses, everything. So that's what the property appraiser does. Okay, number 3 is we have the recorded. I'm just going to call it recorded records. Now, in certain areas, that's the clerk of the court. In certain areas, that's called the register of deeds. There's a bunch of different names for this, but the concept is every deed, every mortgage, every deed of trust, if you're in a deed of trust state, these are all the recorded documents against every piece of real estate get recorded into one office per jurisdiction, per county, parish, borough. Okay, and the last one I'm going to talk about, and to a much smaller extent, is I'm just going to call it the planning department. I'm going to call it planning/zoning. Okay, so that's obviously putting this layer of what the zoning is for each individual property. All right, so these 4 are public records, and by and large, they're absolutely free. The only one that might cost any money is this one, because in some smaller counties, they don't have the budget to give you free online access, but you could physically go to the office and get the access for free. All right, so let's talk about what each one of these can do to help you. All right, so the first one, tax collector. We're going to take you inside and show you what a tax collector website looks like. There are 2 ways to track down or find the tax collector website for your jurisdiction. The first is Google, and that will work just fine.
But the problem is it's not always called the tax collector. So the best way to get access to this information is to go to a data aggregator like netronline.com and then go here to Public Records Online. And then you can choose your state. In this case, I'm going to use Florida. And then you can choose your county or jurisdiction. And that's, in this case, I'm going to go to Volusia County where I'm at. And so what that shows you is the name, the Volusia County Property Appraiser. This is the records. This is the court clerk. So it doesn't say recorder's records. This is the tax collector. It's actually called the tax collector. And then this is the mapping GIS. This is for the zoning. All right, so let's go to tax collector, and it says go to data online, and you click right here. The main reason why you want to start this search at the tax collector level is just how much easier it usually is to find the information. By contrast, as you'll see a little bit later, this clerk of the circuit court, this data doesn't usually allow you to start by address. But since you typically only have an address when you're looking at a vacant house, the tax collector can be great for that. So we're going to switch to property tax, and we're going to type in the address. This is a property that's a perfect example of that. It pulls up both this one, 4611, but remember, I didn't type in 4611, right? I typed in 4166, and then I get it right here, this second one, right here. Okay, so it's nice about this service is they link to some of this other data right here. I'll show you that in a moment. So this shows who the current owner is. Who's the current owner of this property? Federal National Mortgage Association. You know who that is? Freddie Mac. That is a national organization. That's a quasi-government. This is a foreclosure, is what this is. This has been foreclosed upon, and it's not listed right now. And just a real quick tip, in case you ever get a wild hair and you think you're going to be able to buy the property from the bank directly before they ever list, that's very wishful thinking, and it's typically a gigantic waste of your time. What we're looking for when we see vacant properties as real estate investors is we want to see that it's still owned by the homeowner, not by some bank. But again, for you and if you're just seeing some vacant property in the neighborhood, you now know in this particular case, this is owned by a bank. Also gives you some other information, legal description. But the main thing I wanted to do in looking at this was, number one, see if the taxes were paid, which they are through 2015, and I want to see who the owner was.
So the main thing a tax collector website can show you is, number one, are they current on taxes? And if they're not current, that's really interesting information, because we know that if they stay past due long enough, they're going to have a tax lien coming up and eventually a tax deed sale. Number two, it can help us with a parcel ID. And that's really helpful when we get into the other parts of these free public records. Okay, so the second public record we're going to look at is the Property Appraiser. And let me take you inside of what a Property Appraiser website looks like.
This particular service gives us a direct link to the Property Appraiser, but we can also go to it from here. So we can get to the Property Appraiser right here through NETR Online. And here you can search by owner name, parcel ID. And that's another good thing about having access to this information at the tax collector level, is it typically shows you a parcel ID. And this is where you can type in that information. And it pulls up this information from the Property Appraiser. It's going to tell us what type of ownership it is. That's helpful to know. But now we start to see sales history in this particular system, which is wonderful. This is so helpful. It shows us that in 1988, somebody bought it with a warranty deed. And then at some point, a warranty deed was transferred in 95 up. And then there was a quit claim deed in 04. And then there's this certificate of title, government acquisition. So this would have been this foreclosure that occurred. But you see these different $100 sales price. So this tells us that at some point, this person, and I happen to know a little bit about this property, this was transferred from different family members. But when we know what the sales price is, it tells us what the value was at the time it was purchased. Okay, so it also gives us a history of the values. Now this right here is what they call the just value, or the property appraised value. This doesn't mean it's the value of the property. It just means that's the way the tax assessor does the value. What's also nice is it tells us some other data about the property, which is really helpful. Bedrooms, bathrooms, Look at this, electrical heat source, drywall. So this stuff can really come in handy. And then I love this right here. It even shows you, and this is a lot of different counties will do this. It'll actually show you the floor plan in measurements, and that's really helpful too. This is all free. It's all been accessible to you.
As you saw, the Property Appraiser's website is really helpful. It gives you a lot of information, especially in terms of things like, you got dimensions perhaps you learn about. You learn about what they think the value is. Now, it's important to recognize that property appraisers have their own set of rules when they assess the value. So they might assess the value based on comps, and I'm going to give you an example from Monroe County, Florida, and that would be what they do is they take the previous year's comps and they use those, and then what they do is once they assess the value based on square footage, they then take 10% off of that. So it doesn't tell you the exact market value, but it tells you the value that they're basing it on, and if you learn the rules for that specific jurisdiction, it can help you get a better understanding. For example, in the state of Michigan, they have SEV, state equalized values. Same thing, and they're typically literally half of what the true value is. So sometimes you just double the SEV value and you get really close to what the market value might be. But we never want to base our values on the property appraiser. I have a great video on how to determine property value, which is right here, and take a look at that video to learn more about exactly how to value a property. But it gives us some more insight on the property itself. Okay, so now we're going to go into arguably by far the most important part of the entire research. It's the recorded records. Recorded records. Now, let's take you inside of what that looks like.
The recorder's records are right here at the clerk of the circuit court for this particular jurisdiction. The problem with this particular example is that since the owner is Federal National Mortgage, it's really difficult to get a clear understanding of what's happening with this particular property. Because if you type in all those that are owned by Federal NATL, see, look how many different versions it's all written as. This would just be a mess. So I've just decided to pick a different property because it provides a great example. This one right here, and we'll go ahead and search by it. And so one of the problems with searching records is you have to get good at it, because if you can only search by name, or in this case parcel ID, but that doesn't seem to work very well with this system. What's nice is, and I use this example, when you do get the right name and it all works out, you get some pretty interesting information. So let's say you saw this one was vacant. You could sort by date. You find out the latest document recorded was this one, and it's a judgment. What's a judgment? Well, that'd be a judgment in this case for foreclosure. So let me go ahead and show you what that looks like. Here's the actual judgment showing that green tree got a big fat judgment in a total of $331,000. So what this tells you is that, hey, this person's in pre-foreclosure. They haven't foreclosed upon yet, but they're in pre-foreclosure. So again, just wonderful information you can gather. Furthermore, in this case, we look at this. This is a lis pendens. This showed when that actual foreclosure got started. This is the deed from 2012. So you click on that. This shows them who the owner is. So when you see the latest deed of record, that's going to tell you who the owner of the property is. And so there's this warranty deed showing that this Scott person transferred property to this Lisa person. It looks like it had to do with a revocable family trust. So, but I'm sorry, Lisa is the trustee of that revocable family trust. So it's in a family trust. So this tells you who the owner of the property is, whatever the latest deed of record is that's recorded. It doesn't show the mortgage, but if we wanted to go deeper into that, that Scott person would have been the person on the mortgage. Okay, so technically this person is just the trustee. You know, this thing can get really out of hand. There's so much information you can learn about this, but the point is, this is the treasure trove. You get good at searching records, you'll know all kinds of stuff about any property. You'll know how much is owed against it. You'll know who the owner is. You'll know all kinds of great information.
The recorded records is a treasure trove of wisdom. And the more you learn about how to view those records and how to understand what each of those documents mean, the more you will know about a property. You'll know things like if it's in foreclosure. You'll know who the actual owner is. And this is big information to have. because it tells you what really needs to go on with that property. Let's say it's owned by a bank. Then you know it's going to be a lot more difficult to make something happen than if it's owned by the actual homeowner. Or if it's owned by a homeowner, but then there's a quitclaim deed recorded by some random person. So this tells you all kinds of information. And obviously in a video like this, I wouldn't be able to go through all of the different ways in which you assess this kind of information, but this gives you a place in which to get started on learning more about that vacant property. Okay, number 4 on this is what I mentioned is to a much smaller extent, planning/zoning. Now this becomes more important when this property is in a major intersection and there's it's all commercial around it and there's just this one vacant house, because perhaps what's happened is the zoning has changed to commercial and someone has already bought it recently and they're about to tear it down and build some Walgreens or something. Okay, so what you do is, and I'll take you inside of what this looks like, you can look at the actual property and look at the zoning and other overlays, and that gives you some more insight about the property.
The planning and zoning information, the GIS map, that's another thing you can do on Google, is you could type in just GIS map for that, whatever that jurisdiction is. This can be incredibly helpful, especially when you're trying to figure out if the property is in a busy area and it might be zoned differently. And what I really like is this right here. This is a nice feature, this recent sales, because what it allows you to do is see what other stuff is sold around that property in a relatively close period of time for valuation purposes. But either way, so what you're going to do is you're going to type in either, in this case, it was parcel ID, or we can do address. So it locates it here. And then when you get this, not only is it helpful because it shows you the property lines, but it also can show you a lot more detail once you get to the layer level. So here's where you can show parcel text. So it'll show you things like what the parcel data is on there, and you can scroll in, scroll out, all kinds of fun stuff. This really is helpful if you're in a rural area and there's just a lot of rural land. You can do recent sales. That shows you the property next door in 2014. It sold for $287,500. Pretty helpful. And in most areas have this kind of data. So you have access to this kind of information. Really helpful. And you really scroll out and it really starts to show you the different sales. So that is another feature that can help you get a skinny on what's going on with the property, is by looking at the GIS map and just getting a feel for the boundaries and what the zoning could be and all that great stuff.
So there you have it. Between a tax collector, property appraiser, recorded records, and the planning and zoning maps, you can learn a tremendous amount about that property. But for some of you, you don't have as much time and you have more money. And so I'm going to show you a shortcut. The shortcut to property research involves paying for a service that compiles all of that public record data into one easy-to-view service and format. And the main player in that space is CoreLogic, and they have a product called RealQuest. RealQuest.com to learn more about it. And if you're a licensed real estate agent, the listing version of this, if you will, is called RealList. Now, RealList is usually only accessible through the local MLS. And there are other MLSs that don't use RealList, but they might use a system called CRS, and there's a few others as well. So if you do have access to the MLS, you instantly have access to one of these property research tools. And what's so nice is that they are able to bring all that information together and it's easy to view. Let me take you inside of RealList to show you what I mean.
This particular account with RealList is only going to focus on that same region within the MLS, but a RealQuest would be the entire nation. So this is where we'd put in the information. So when we pull this up, you get, the 4-bedroom, 2-bath. You see how much easier it is to read this stuff. You see that it's Freddie Mac that owns it, and it tells you school district, tells you zoning. It's just a lot easier. You see your parcel IDs. It will show you the last recorded information, which in this case it shows is that down here you see how it's going from these different people. 88 goes to see the stays in the family, and then it goes to foreclosure for this amount. So as you can see, it gives you all kinds of data there. It shows the actual dimensions of the lot, and that's really, really helpful. And look, it even says here in a big flag, bank owned, right? So you can go to the foreclosure tab and it tells you about that as well. And it tells you about what happened, the final judgment, how much the final judgment was for. So yes, this data right here can all be obtained for free. In fact, this kind of data here is shown in the foreclosure records at a different department in the government. But boy, it's easy when you can get access to all this quickly, isn't it? So this is your shortcut right here to use a service like either RealQuest or Realist if you have MLS access or anything of the sort.
So if you're not licensed, you use RealQuest. And if you do have your real estate license and MLS access, then you're going to have some sort of property research tool inside of your MLS system. All right, so once you've done all that, for the most part, you've gathered just about as much information as you can about the property. Now, some people ask me, well, Phil, how do I get in touch with the owner? Well, remember, through these systems, you're going to have access to different addresses, either mailing addresses and property addresses, or just property addresses, and sometimes people forward their mail when they move out. So the first thing you can do is you can send a handwritten letter. That can work very well, because even if it doesn't go directly to them at the property, it might get forwarded to them. Or you can also go to the mailing addresses if there are different mailing addresses on file in these different systems. The next thing you can do is skip tracing. Skip tracing is like a private detective's database that they use in order to look up people's information. Now, the service I typically use is called peoplesearchnow.com. But I don't know if that's any better than other services. So there's so many skip tracing softwares out there. We've tested like 30 of them. We like peoplesearchnow.com the best, but there might be others that are even better. I like because this one shows the family members and the family members' phone numbers, and so you can really hit the phones and sometimes track some people down. The other thing is you can use skip tracing to maybe look up the neighbor's information and try to call them. But that brings me to my top secret way to track down an owner of a vacant house. And it's this: talk to the neighbors. Knock on some doors. You'd be surprised how often neighbors can get a hold of the person that moved out, of whoever owned that property next door. It's incredible because neighbors are nosy and they tend to know this stuff and they've been watching it. So this can be a great way to track down who the owner is. All right. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video on how to get the backstory on a vacant house, because this can help you, especially if you're a real estate investor and you want to try to pick up a deal that you see as vacant when you drive by. But even if you're just a curious neighbor and you want to know a lot more about what's going on over there, I hope this video gives you some concrete ways in which you can really dig in and figure out what's going on. All right, well, if you want to learn more about how to be a very successful real estate investor, I want to strongly encourage you to pick up and read both of my books, both How to Be a Real Estate Investor as well as Real Estate Investing Gone Bad. Also, subscribe to this channel because you're the first to watch my new videos when they come out. And also, you're going to love the treasure trove of videos I have stored in this channel because there's a tremendous amount of wisdom I share through them. And if you want to become a market-leading, first-class, full-time, professional, money-making machine real estate investor, check out my apprentice program where me and my team work directly with real estate investors and transform them into rock stars of real estate. All right, well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you've got any questions or comments or tips to add to what I've shared, go to just the bottom here and fill those in. I'd love to hear your comments and share your thoughts with me. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next video.